So Mr. Gary Maupin is our first speaker. He's in person and he has 5 minutes. Then we will have two YouTube video speakers, and because they're not in the auditorium, I won't name them until they're called upon. So, Mr. Maupin, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Doing pretty well. You know, it's a little relaxed. It's hard to get back into the swing of things.
Right. Well, thank you all for your work on the Reston Comprehensive Plan that got approved last night.
Congratulations to everybody involved with that. Yeah.
And particularly Commissioner Carter. So thank you so much. As you mentioned, my name is Gary Maupin. I'm speaking for myself. I live in Reston, but since I moved here from March of 1951, I've lived in a lot of districts in the county and think I know the transportation and parking issues pretty well. I've been involved with Parking Reimagined from inception as a district representative to the County Parking Reimagined Work Group, and in speaking from that experience. In making my comments, I've had and still do have a very high regard for the staff assigned to this effort and the extensive outreach they have done as they work through things to get to the point we are tonight. Michael, Bill, and Austin are truly excellent staff personnel, and you hear that as they speak tonight. I've testified before, but I have a couple of new points to make, but we'll make a short highlight of what was said before. First, the analysis supporting this effort, to me, just doesn't support where we are today. It was just not adequate. It has a lot of flaws. Second, the amendment proposed is directly, in my opinion, in violation of county policy regarding equity as set forth in 1 Fairfax. This proposed change in the ordinance will clearly more negatively impact low-income, minority, and disabled people. Studies and media information completely support that. The county saying that the amendment supports Fairfax 1 simply, to me, is foolishness. The evidence is overwhelming that it does not. My new points are as follows. First, while as many others have recommended that all the delegations to the LDS director be rescinded, in looking at this further, it appears that many of these delegations are really not appropriate, except for the by right projects and a few others. Fairfax County process to me would require that these deviations to the minimums go to the Board of Supervisors for approval. In addition, authority and processes affecting you and the Board of Supervisors just received significant required changes by the General Assembly. This is not the time to subject the county to scrutiny by going too far in its delegations. Second, as a member of the County Parking Reimagined Work Group, I've observed diligent and experienced members asking extensive number of questions that if this was very clear, which it is not in my mind, they would not have to ask. I've then seen that it takes a lengthy period of time for staff to answer these, and it makes me wonder how much it takes for them to go back and look at this. So I think this really needs to be a clearer document for the average citizen to understand, and this really should be changed. Well, I would request a delay for the better analysis I talked about, getting attuned to 1 Fairfax and better writing. It may be that you intend to go forward with some changes. If that is your decision, I would suggest you might consider 2 simple things. One, the LDS director approval reductions I just talked about. And second, maybe just simply halving all the changes in this proposed amendment from what they are and reducing what we're doing today and look for a better analysis for the future. Again, I think we had great staff, a lot of great work, and a lot of great listening by you. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Dennis Hayes, representing the Reston Citizens Association. Welcome, Mr. Hayes.
Hey, Mr. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. First off, I'm very pleased to be speaking at 10 minutes after 9 and not 10 minutes after midnight like the last time I was here. I'm back because I'm still unable to understand why this proposal keeps moving forward in its present form. And as before, my comments are limited to the multifamily parking standards issue. Let me start with a baseline. We have baselines, and they're the existing multifamily communities that we have spread all over the county. If you look at them, and all of these presumably are under the 1.6 or higher level, the parking is either adequate or not quite adequate, insufficient. But if you put them under the new proposals, the ones that are being recommended here, they all will be insufficient. As the county's website notes, only 4% of our residents don't have a car. I think they mean households, but that's what it said. And 53% own more than one vehicle. And this doesn't count the fact that people have family that visit them. They have friends that come over. Their service vehicles are a common sight. And the number of cars in America goes up 1% every year. So in trying to figure out how all this is going along, I usually try the sort of, who, what, where approach, so if you'll bear with me on that. Let me start with the what. Staff has given you a range of numbers, going from the current 1.6 down to a recommended 1.3, and there's additional cuts that could come from that in addition. But they haven't really given you a lot of information on what this actually means. I was a liberal arts major, but my math, I think, is good enough to know that if you had a 200-unit community, that drops the parking spaces from 320 to 260. Okay? Where do they go? Where do the 60 cars go? They don't just disappear. They don't turn into bicycles. What they do is that people park in accessible spaces. They park illegally. They park in neighboring communities. They park 300 yards away in a strip mall lot. The parking predetermined doesn't solve any problems. It only shifts them to somewhere else. And I guess since the statute of limitations probably expired, and 3 of those 4 examples I've given, I personally have had to do, going to see my daughters in the various places they've lived along the way, not to mention the countless hours lost driving around looking for parking spaces that don't exist. Now the where did this proposal come from? As you were told in the July 12th staff report, the numbers were, quote, lowered to reflect national trends. Okay? Who determines this trend? Well, it's an organization dedicated to, quote, helping communities that want to reduce their dependence on cars. The same organization that published Zero Auto Ownership. And again, to quote, this is to promote the concept of fostering and consciously investing in urban lifestyles that support zero auto ownership. Now, does that sound like an organization capable of producing an independent and impartial analysis? I often try to heed Marcus Aurelius's recommendation, advice. Ask first, why does he do this thing? Or in this case, why did the staff do this thing? Conduct their own thorough investigation. Perhaps it's because the results that would have come from this would not support this proposal. Now we move to who. Who wants this? Certainly not the people that actually live in these communities. We've heard from a steady stream of earnest, youngish individuals from across the country who regale us with stories of biking 8 miles uphill in a snowstorm to go to Whole Foods. And well, good for them. I wish I could do that. But hearing the same talking points over and over indicates that these are true believers. And that's fine. But it's not fine when true believers decide that what they think is right has to be imposed on everybody else. It's okay if they don't want to have a car. More power to them. But they want all of us to also not have a car. And in their passion and in their certainty, they ignore and dismiss the very real hardships they gratuitously impose on others. After all, it's for the greater good. So the next who encompasses the why, which I think is the heart of all of this. The real driving force here is money. Granted, parking spaces come at a cost. Now, here in Fairfax, we're blessed with a good many, even great developers who take pride in their work, who strive to deliver a quality product, and who build a reputation over decades. But not all developers hold to those same high standards. Some look for the easy way, the cheap way, cutting corners where they can. And there's no corner that's easier to cut than a parking space. They're prepared to shortchange their very customers for a bit more profit. The developers certainly know how many parking spaces are needed to service a healthy community, but they're hoping that you don't. Now the wind. I've had the pleasure over the past 10 or 12 years to work with county staff. We certainly have not always agreed on everything, but I've always found them to be serious, well-meaning professionals. And this is why I'm perplexed and why I've come back a second time here. How can they advocate for a proposal that has so many flaws in it? A proposal that will inflict hardship, frustration, cost on tens of thousands of our neighbors. This has been around for years, so why haven't they done their own survey? Now, I've read the consultant's report of 7 years ago. Did a fine job, but they were asked the wrong questions. So, my advice simply is get out. Talk to the grandfather coming home late after working 2 jobs. Talk to the young mother juggling groceries and 2 small children. You'd be amazed what people will tell you. So please, members of the commission, again, I thank you for your patience here. You have the knowledge, you have the experience, and you have the responsibility to act in the best interest of the citizens of Fairfax. I urge you to send the multifamily section back to staff and instruct them to develop a plan that applies to Fairfax, not some reputed national trend cooked up by a biased third party. Your decisions will affect not just our neighbors today, but children yet unborn who 25 or 30 years from now might just have that extra quality of life that is in your power to give them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sean Endsley, who's in person representing himself, followed by Lynn Mulston, who represents Reston 2020, who's also in person. And finally, we'll have Mark Crawford on the phone representing himself. Mr. Endsley, good morning, good evening.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I thank you for the opportunity to comment on changes to the zoning ordinance for off-street parking and loading called Parking Reimagined. My name is Sean Endsley. I live in Reston. I'm a CPA and retired Chief Financial Officer of a public company. I have 4 observations and comments, and I hope these comments will influence changes to Parking Reimagined. First, I want to comment on the premise articulated by the county staff that reductions in the minimum parking requirements, or MPR, will result in more green space. That is an assertion without basis in fact. A reduction in MPR for development projects means that developers have more space to pursue their economic interest. More space means that developers have more space for economic profit. That is the logical and factual result, not more green space. Any indication is simply contrary to the economic interests of the developers. Second, reduction in the MPR produces contrary results. The underlying premise is that by reducing MPRs, the county will reduce car usage and hence pollution. That is also simply not the case. Automobile use means freedom and allows all members of our community, particularly low-wage earners and minorities, to pursue and enhance their economic potential. Reducing places where members of our community can park, whether near their homes or employment, does not create economic benefits for those users. In fact, with reduced parking availability, individuals will need to drive longer in search of parking near their homes or employment, increasing car emissions, not reducing car emissions. To argue that mass transit will eliminate these issues ignores the fact that mass transit cannot and will not provide access to every single location and economic opportunity in the county. Third, The amended ordinance gives the Director of Land Development Services the authority to approve a 30% additional reduction in the MPR beyond the changes proposed in the ordinance, and possibly more for development projects. This change arrogates too much power to the Director, an unelected and therefore unaccountable county employee. The Board of Supervisors should approve these reductions and is accountable to the public for its actions, as we now know coming up very soon in an election. Fourth, implementation of Parking Reimagined ignores the complexities inherent in a county of over 1 million residents. What might be beneficial in Tysons might be disruptive in McLean, McLean to Vienna, Vienna to Reston, and Reston to Herndon, and then vice versa. The changes proposed should be outlined section by section in the county and are not specific enough. To ascertain the impact of such changes across the county, a phased approach to Parking Reimagined is warranted. Thank you for this opportunity to present my comments, and if you have any questions, I welcome them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Endsley. Next up is Ms. Lynn Mulston, representing Reston 2020, and followed by Mark Crawford. Ms. Mulston, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Planning Commissioners, my name is Lynn Mulston. I live at 11472 Links Drive, and I'm here this evening representing Reston 2020, an independent Reston Citizens Committee dedicated to sustaining Reston's quality of life through excellence in community planning, zoning, and development. When we were here the last time for the very late July 26th public testimony, I shared the good, the bad, and the ugly of Parking Reimagined. At that time, I walked you through an example from Reston where Supervisor Alcorn and his staff are working very hard to renovate our Lake Ann Village Center. Right now, the county minimum parking requirement for multifamily housing in this area is 1.3 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Under Parking Reimagined, that would be reduced to 1.04 parking spaces per unit in this non-TSA TOD area for the proposed consolidated redevelopment with 935 dwelling units as described in a Reston Now article. Only 972 spaces would be required for nearly 2,000 residents. We'll take a deeper dive into that shortly, but first tonight I want to take you through a few more detailed examples of Reston, and I really want to kind of give you a deeper dive into Reston. As an example, the Harrison Apartments, which opened in 2015, has received several complaints from residents. You only get one parking space that's assigned, and that's whether you have a one-bedroom, two-bedroom, or a three-bedroom apartment. And there isn't any visitor parking. There are 18 unassigned parking spaces, 9 of which are reserved for vendors and the leasing office for a building that has 360 apartments. 9 parking spaces for your guests. Visitors have to park across the street at the MVP building. So this is slated for redevelopment. So where are visitors going to park when that property is redeveloped? If the county is expecting shared parking between commercial and residential, we now know this does not work given the increases in home-based business working trends. Those residential spaces simply will not open up during the day for commercial traffic. The following Reston clusters and condominiums are already forced to utilize on-street parking for their family and guests. For example, Fairway Cluster, Chestnut Grove condominiums. I know Commissioner Carter is familiar with these. The Charter Oak Townhomes, the cluster, they have 2 guest parking spaces, so visitors park on North Shore Drive. Charter Oak Apartments, where there are too few spaces for the multiple tenants in each 2-bedroom unit. Hemingway Cluster, Shadowwood Condominium, and Lakeside Cluster guests all utilize roadside parking. The redeveloped Tall Oaks Village Center has little guest parking, and Tall Oaks Assisted Living, that lost much shared parking to development, has had to come back to the Planning Commission for allocation of additional parking, which has been granted, although pulled from designated open space. On the south side of the Dulles Toll Road, this is the API site where the expensive Secas townhomes have been built, there is no parking for visitors or guests, much less the Pipeline Park, because parking spots are all taken up by the residents with their extra cars. There is no visitor parking on site for Lake Ann Fellowship House. Again, guests are forced to park on North Shore Drive or the parking lot at Lake Ann. Think what a mess the quintupling of residents at reduced parking availability in neighboring Crescent apartments will cause. Of further concern is the indication from staff that Reston has been identified as a pilot for paid parking. We've all seen the mess that Boston Properties has made with their paid parking experiment at Reston Town Center. This pilot needs to be concentrated to within 1/4 mile of metro stations and not impact the residential areas where on-street parking is absolutely necessary. Before I conclude, I want to acknowledge the response from county staff that handicapped or ADA accessible parking would not be impacted directly by Parking Reimagined. However, the indirect result of Parking Reimagined to designated ADA parking will be catastrophic. On an increasing basis, the spaces will be denied to those who require them due to blockage by delivery vehicles and frustrated, able-bodied patrons who are just parking in the ADA accessible spots. I want to end by picking up where we started. With the redevelopment of Crescent Apartments, these affordable ADU apartments owned by the county are part of the Lake Ann Village Center. The county is now studying how Lake Ann Village Center should be redeveloped, starting with Crescent Apartments. Here are the calculations for the implications of Parking Reimagined for Crescent Apartments. Currently, they have 181 apartments with at least 235 parking spaces. That is the 1.3 spaces per dwelling unit. This is housing for 380 people using county housing calculations of 2.1 people per unit. That's 2/3 of a parking spot for each resident. Proposed 935 apartments under the consolidated option with 972 parking spaces required, and that's using the 1.04 factor. A 20% reduction from the current minimum. Housing for 1,964 people. So that's about one spot for every 2 people expected to live there. Now, if the adjusted rate goes through, since Crescent Apartments are near a transit stop and meet at least 2 of the other 3 requirements for adjustment, the Director of Land Development Services, at the request of the developer and without any hearings, reduces the number of parking spaces at Crescent Apartments by another 30% to 680 spaces, or roughly 1 space for every 3 people expected to live there. So while the number of planned apartments quintuples, the number of parking spaces could less than triple. That's a future shortfall of more than 500 parking spaces at the redeveloped Crescent Apartments based on today's minimum parking requirement. And for Crescent residents, the alternative transportation options are not good. Crescent Apartments is 2 miles from the nearest metro stop, Reston Station. Bus service to Reston, Herndon, and Tyson's metro stations runs at about half-hour intervals during peak periods, making it difficult for commuters. People are not going to make the 30-minute walk to Reston Station, although some may opt for the 12-minute bike trip. Taxis and Uber are expensive alternatives for regular use, especially for those in this county-owned affordable housing. As a result, Crescent apartment residents largely rely on their automobiles to reach jobs, shopping, entertainment, and others. To add public transit and other needed infrastructure would almost certainly require another transportation service district tax for Lake Ann Village Center, as now exists in Reston's transit station areas at about 2 cents per $100 valuation. If Parking Reimagined is approved and Crescent Apartments redeveloped, what will happen is that more residents will park along already crowded North Shore Drive, and if they can get away with it, at Lake Ann's Washington Plaza, or even more distant schools and churches. Not a fun walk in the rain, sleet, snow, and oppressive heat. As a result, their quality of life will be reduced unnecessarily, so developers in the county may make more money. In short, Parking Reimagined is a one-dimensional social engineering experiment to force people out of their cars that ignores the wide variety of consequences it would generate and fails to guarantee the societal gains it states as goals. Most importantly, it fails to consider the complexities faced by people living, working, and playing in our county and the Reston community. Keep in mind that Fairfax County's population is aging, and a projected 17% of the population will be over age 65 by 2035. If approved, the county will create a less desirable place to live and likely lead to the growing outmigration of residents. Reston 2020 requests that this
Ms.
proposal, I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
One sentence.
Okay.
Reston 2020 requests that this proposal be sent back to staff and Clarion for some much-needed reworking that takes into consideration the needs of the residents and not just the developers. Thank you again for your time and consideration and
Thank
the extra
you.
time.
Thank you.